What's up guys, Firewolf here, giving you a full step-by-step tutorial guide on this Hyte Y40 case. Hyte sent over this beautiful panda color alongside other components so I can put together this awesome black and white gaming PC featuring the 9800 X3D and RTX 5080. Huge thanks to MSI for their motherboard and First Player for their amazing 1000 watt PSU. This video is crazy long, but I'll have timestamps so you can feel free to skip ahead or come back whenever you lost. All the components will be listed in the description down below, along with affiliate links which help support my channel. But your time is worth more to me, so thank you, and I hope this guide inspires you to start your Y40 build and earn a subscribe from you. Here are all the components that we're going to be using for this awesome Hyte Y40 Panda build. Starting off with the CPU, we have the best gaming CPU. This is the Ryzen 7 9800 X3D, and we're going to pair that up with the MSI Gaming Trio White 5080, a beautiful white graphics card. And for the motherboard, we're going to go for the MSI MPG X870E Edge TI Wi-Fi, which is a beautiful white silvery motherboard with some really nice black accents. And cooling our 9800 X3D, we're going to be using the Hyte Thick Q60 AIO, and as the name suggests, this is a very thick AIO that comes with a nice large screen, so I'm really excited to see how this is going to look on the Hyte Y40. And powering this whole build is going to be the First Player NGDP 1000 watt platinum rated PSU, which is a beautiful black PSU with enough power to power this whole awesome build. For the RAM, we're going to go for the G.Skill Trident Z5 Neo RGB CL30 64 gigabytes in this awesome white color. For the internal SSD, we're going to go for the Samsung 9100 Pro 2 terabyte, which is a Gen 5 NVMe with speeds up to 14,700 megabytes per second. For the case fans, we're going to go for the Hyte Thick FP12 fans. As you can see here, it has a beautiful white and black color scheme that matches beautifully with the panda theme on this Hyte case. And as you can see here, they are magnetically daisy chainable, making it very easy to install. So I'll go over exactly how to set it up. Now for optional accessories, we have the Hyte Noodle LN60, which is going to give it some nice soft RGB lighting on the floor of the case. Now, depending on how many internal USBs you need, I highly recommend getting yourself a powered USB hub if you're going to be using more than 2 internal USB headers. And so what this does is that it gives you 4 additional internal USB headers, since most motherboards might only carry 2 internal USB headers. And the last optional accessory are these awesome white and black extension cables. This is by Easy DIY, and while these are optional, I think they're going to really stand out on this awesome white and black color scheme that we're going for. And finally, we have the star of the show, the Hyte Y40 in this awesome panda color that gives you an awesome white exterior with all black on the inside. So I think that having white components on the inside will definitely make it pop. So I'm really excited to start this build. So the first thing we're going to do here is prepare our motherboard. Alright, now you're ready to prep up our motherboard. In this step, we'll be installing our CPU, our NVMe SSD, and our RAM on this awesome MSI MPG X870E Edge TI Wi-Fi. So the first step, we're going to be installing the CPU, which goes right over here. All we have to do is drop this latch down to the right, all the way up, and then lift this socket cover up. And that's going to reveal our AM5 socket with all the pins. Be very careful and cautious not to drop anything on here, since these pins are very delicate. And as you're opening up from the plastic shell, be very careful you don't drop your CPU, and definitely don't do this over your motherboard here because you don't want any type of accidental damages. So just keep that in mind. So go ahead and open up your CPU. Try to hold your CPU on its side. Make sure you don't make any type of contact on the bottom of the CPU. And for AM5 processors, you're going to locate that triangle on the top left, which matches the triangle on the top left of the socket. And you're also going to notice some notches on the top and bottom, which also aligns with the socket as well. So now we're ready to drop in the CPU nice and carefully. Give that a nice wiggle, making sure the notches line up. Now we can drop this cover down. I would recommend placing a hand on the motherboard and then bringing this latch down, which does have some resistance. So go ahead and push it all the way down and back in. And then we can remove this cover away. I recommend keeping this just in case. And now we have the Ryzen 7 9800 X3D successfully installed. All right, next up is going to be our RAM. This is the Trident Z5 Neo RGB. And the RAM gets installed on this section over here. Most motherboards have a total of 4 DIMM slots, and they're usually labeled starting from the left A1, A2, and then B1 and B2. If you're just going to use 2 RAM sticks, then you want to populate the second and the fourth slot, or A2, B2. And if for whatever reason you want to use just one, make sure it's on the A2 slot. And then if you use 4, then of course you can populate all 4. And so before we install the RAM, we do have to drop these latches down. So I'm going to drop the latch from the second slot or A2 and then the fourth slot or B2. And then depending on your motherboard, you may have additional latches on the bottom that you could also push down. So this one does have it as well. So I push A2 down and also B2 down. And next thing you want to do is grab your RAM, locate this notch here and make sure it aligns with the notch over here. You'll see like a little silver trim. So if I try to install the RAM this way, you'll notice that the notch does not align. But if I flip it over, you'll notice that the notch aligns perfectly. So this is the correct orientation. So I like to just slide it right on top. Grab the second one, same thing. Make sure we have the right side. Go ahead and drop it in. And all we have to do is push it in. I like to push it in from the bottom and then the top. You're gonna hear 2 clicks. And just like that, we have our RAM successfully installed. Next up, we're going to install our NVMe drives. I'm going to be using the 9100 Pro as my main, and I have a secondary one just in case you guys want to know how to install additional NVMe SSDs. And so depending on your motherboard, I highly recommend reference your user manual for any type of lane sharing or any type of additional details of your specific motherboard, but I'll go over this one. Now the great thing about this STI Wi-Fi is that all of these NVMe slots can be easily removed with a simple push and lift mechanism. So I just push this button to the left and this whole piece comes off very easily. This is awesome, DIY friendly, and the same thing I can do for all these additional slots. So just go ahead and click the left, lift it up. Same thing with the bottom one. And so this motherboard has a total of 4 NVMe slots, with the top 2 supporting up to a Gen 5 drive and the bottom 2 supporting up to a max of Gen 4. These bottom 2 NVMe slots connect directly to the chipset, then to the CPU, which does reduce the performance of your NVMe drive because it has to communicate to the chipset in order to route to the CPU, while these other 2 NVMe drives connect directly to the CPU, giving you the best performance possible. However, it's important to know your motherboard specific layout because some of these NVMe drives that connect to the CPU may share bandwidth with your main PCIe slot where your graphics card goes. So some motherboards might reduce that in half down to an X8. Now the great thing about this specific STI Wi-Fi is that this secondary slot actually does not share any type of bandwidth with the main slot. Now the only trade-off is that while this is a Gen 5 giving you super fast speeds, if I populate this second one on this specific motherboard, the USB 4 ports on the left side of the motherboard shares bandwidth with these 2 USB 4 slots. And so because of that, if I populate this NVMe on the second slot, this second slot will no longer run at 4 lanes. It will only run on 2 lanes. And the same thing for the USB 4 drives, they will only run with 2 lanes. The great thing here is that this STI Wi-Fi does give you the option to completely disable the USB 4 slot. So for those of you guys that are not planning on using the full benefits of USB 4 and maybe you're okay with just using one USB-C at 10 gigs and all the other USBs, then MSI does give you the option to completely disable it, which then allows this secondary slot to run at full speeds. So I can definitely populate 2 Gen 5 drives without having to worry about my main slot being taken away. Again, the only trade-off is that USB 4 will be completely disabled. So it's up to you how you want to position your NVMe drives if you're using multiple drives. So with all of that out of the way, in order to install our NVMe drive, our main NVMe drive, we do have to remove this little plastic sticker here that reveals the thermal pattern. Now this is only for the main drive on this motherboard. And then you're going to locate the notch over here and you're going to match that with that notch over there as well. And you position the NVMe at an angle and you push it right in. And then I can simply just push this all the way down and that locks into place. Very easy and convenient. Now your motherboard, you may have to screw it in. So follow the manual of your motherboard, of course. Now, so for my secondary drive, again, I have the option of using the second slot if I wanted to. However, I personally like to utilize the benefits of USB 4 because I do use DisplayPort on that USB 4 and I use USB 4 enclosures. So to ensure that my USB 4s remain at the maximum speeds, I would just personally populate either the third one or the fourth slot. I'm personally just going to put it on the third slot. And again, that decision is completely up to you. And I can go ahead and push this all the way down and that clicks in very easily. If I ever want to take it off, all I have to do is push this to the left and that lifts off. It's very easy and convenient. And the last step here is to reinstall our heat sinks. Go ahead and turn it over and make sure you remove the plastic covering that thermal pad. And then I'm going to reposition it back on top in an angle here. And then I can just push this in and it locks in very easily without the need of screwdrivers. And I repeat the same steps for all the additional heat sinks. Of course, since I'm only using one on this one, I have to just remove the bottom one. And put that in an angle, push it in. That's perfect. And then I have no drive here, so I can just slot this back in. And that's pretty much it. Our motherboard is about 95% prepped up. With the final thing to do here is to attach our AIO standoffs, but I like to do that on the step that I covered the AIO. So for now, we can put our motherboard to the side and prep up our case. All right, next step is to prep up our case. We'll be removing all the panels that we could remove off of this case to make it easy for us to install all of the other components. So starting off with the side glass panel, you can locate this tab right over here and you just pull it towards you. And this whole glass panel comes off. And while we're here, we can remove the top panel. There's a little tab here as well. You can easily pull this whole thing up and top panel's out. And so let's keep rotating the case here. So to remove the whole back panel, same thing here. We have another tab. We just pull it towards you. And this whole back piece comes off very easily. Now, as for the front glass, you can remove it if you want to. There are a total of 6 screws holding it in place. There's 2 on the side, 2 on top. There's also 2 additional screws in the corner as well. So it's up to you if you want to remove the front glass. However, since we have good access to attach fans on the side, I don't think it's necessary at all to go through the hassle of removing all the glass panels. But again, it is completely up to you if you want to go that route. All right, so next thing here, let's go ahead and remove this little foam piece. All right, and then we're going to rotate the case over. All right, and on the bottom of the case, let's go ahead and remove this box. All right, so this box here is going to include additional accessories, such as your motherboard screws, PSU screws, and some extra stuff over here. We're definitely going to be using the motherboard screws. For now, we're going to leave these cables intact. All right, so the next step here to fully prepare the Y40 is going to be, depending on whether or not you want to use the existing fans that come pre-installed. You got a total of 2, one in the rear and one in the bottom that we just saw. And it's completely up to you if you want to use these fans. As you guys know, I'll be using the Hite FP12 instead. So starting off with the rear fan, we have 4 screws right on the back over here that I'm just going to take off. All right, so after the 4 screws, make sure you place a hand on the fan so it doesn't just drop violently. And I forgot to mention that the wire for this fan is located right over here that we do have to untangle. This is the PWM connector here, so if you ever wanted to connect this to the motherboard, you definitely can. So we can easily remove this fan. I still appreciate the fact that we get 2 pre-installed fans here, but these fans offer way more airflow since these can only spin up to a max of 1300 RPM. And then the final fan is going to be this one in the bottom, tucked right underneath here. To access that one is going to be a little bit tricky. Now my recommendations for any type of loose screws, I will just put them in this box here so that way you don't lose them. All right, so to remove this bottom fan, first untangle this because it's going to have the PWM connector. So we're just going to let these cables hang out. And next thing here, to access the screws, we do have to flip the case underneath. And on the bottom of the case, as you can see, we have 2 filters here that we can easily remove by just lifting this up. I would kind of pull this tab more towards you to be able to lift it up completely. And then we have 4 screws, same thing with the rear fan. We're just going to unscrew this right now. All right, so after the 4 screw, this fan can be removed very easily. And it is being routed to this tunnel, so let me just lift this case up real quick so I can show you. So this PWM connector is right over here, as you can see. So we just have to push that through the tunnel. And it comes off very easy and very seamlessly. And that's going to leave this case fully prepared to attach our own fans. Now, if you want to, you're more than welcome to attach your whatever bottom fan that you want to use now. But I want to do that after when I start installing the fan. So for now, I'm going to leave all of these cables inside. And the final thing I'm going to remove here is going to be this riser cable over here. And the reason why I personally prefer to remove it completely is it's easier for me to install the motherboard and have all the space that I need to cable manage. So there's a total of 2 screws that are holding the top portion of the riser cable. So just go ahead and unscrew those. All right, so with those 2 screws out of the way, if you wanted to install the motherboard by keeping this in, you definitely can. You just have to push this and then you'll have room to install that motherboard. but I'd rather just get it out the way completely. That way I have the most space and I don't have to worry about the riser being in the way all the time. So there's a total of 2 screws. There's a screw on the bottom left corner and a screw on the top right of this riser. So let's go ahead and unscrew those. All right, so with those 2 screws out of the way, I can now remove this whole riser cable out of the way. And I like to leave this towards the end when I'm actually installing the graphics card. So now that we have this Y40 fully prepped, let's go ahead and lay the case flat down so we can install our motherboard. All right, so now we're ready to install our motherboard. They're gonna go on top of these 9 standoffs that you see over here. And if you happen to have a smaller motherboard like a micro ATX, then you can definitely move some of these standoffs to accommodate the size of your motherboard. Or if you have like a super tiny ITX, it'll support it as well. So when it comes to installing the motherboard, go ahead and grab it. And with your motherboard here, pay attention to the opening over here, because on an ATX motherboard, I can literally place it right on top. So as you're putting it down, just go in an angle. And once you're about here, go ahead and start lowering it down. And then you can lay it on the case. And then I like to grab my opposite hand and kind of pick the IO ports and guide the motherboard, lifting it up so I can find that perfect sweet spot. And I think I just found it, and all the screw holes should line up. Next, you're gonna go through the accessory kit here. You're gonna look for these screws that say MB for motherboard. And so you're gonna grab a total of 9 motherboard screws, and then you can go ahead and screw them all in. All right, so if you're struggling to find the last screw hole, depending on your motherboard, your M.2 heatsink might be covering it. So the good news about this motherboard is I can easily push and lift this right out the way. That's going to reveal the final screw point. Final one. All right, with that in, let's go ahead and put this back in. All right, now our motherboard is successfully installed. We can go ahead and lift up the case now. All right, here's how we're looking so far with the motherboard completely installed. I think it looks really nice in this black interior. So let's go ahead and rotate the case to connect the Y40 cables. All right, so now that we're behind the Y40, now will be a great time to connect case connectors directly to the motherboard. Now the Y40 is going to have a total of 4 connectors, or a total of 5 if you're planning on using the pre-installed fan here. As you saw before, they were all bundled together, but I of course removed these fans because I'll be using the FP12s instead. So for now, I'm going to show you guys how to connect these standard 4 connectors, and I'll quickly cover over this PWM connector as well, just in case you want to use the bottom fans. Starting off with the front panel connector, this is responsible for the power button of the Y40, and so we're going to position that cable on the bottom left. So go ahead and feed this underneath here. So with your opposite hand, go ahead and just pull it all the way through, and we'll connect that right after. The next cable is going to be your HD audio, which controls a 3.5mm jack on the Y40 as well. And that's going to be located on the bottom right. So same thing here. There's another opening here. You can go ahead and slide that in and pull it right through. And next up are going to be our USB connectors. And so the larger one that has the blue coating is going to be for your USB-A ports on the Y40. And then the smaller one is going to be for the USB-C port of the Y40. Now for the USB-As, they're usually located more on the bottom side of the motherboard. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass it through here, in this opening here. And the USB-C connector are usually located more on the top side, but again, it depends on your motherboard. So I'm just going to pass this cable on top over here. And if you're going to be using the original case fan here, then you can move this PWM connector underneath one of these, pull it right through, and I'll show you exactly where to connect this PWM. So for now, let's go ahead and rotate the case over. All right, so we should have all 4 connectors, or 5 if you're using the additional bottom fan. All right, so the first connector we're going to start off is going to be our USB-C connector, and reference your motherboard's manual for a complete layout exactly where these connectors are. Now, generally the USB-C are sometimes located around here, but on this specific motherboard is actually located on this side of the motherboard in a right angle orientation. Some motherboards will have the connectors kind of like this, where you can connect it right straight on, but on this one, we're actually going to rotate the case here just so I can give you guys a better close-up of where the connectors are at. And so the USB-C connector on the HTI is this connector over here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to retract this cable, and I'm going to position this here so that way it's closer, and we're just going to connect that right in. And so it only goes one way, so if it doesn't go one way, you can go ahead and switch the orientation. So actually this one has a really tight path, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start pinching this cable up so it can stay upward. Next cable is going to be our USB-A. Now some motherboards might have just one or they'll have two. On this motherboard we have a total of two, so I have the option to put it on top or bottom. Completely up to you. I'm just going to put it right underneath. Pay attention to this notch and make sure you line up the notches and go ahead and push that all the way in, and that's snapped in very nicely. And now I can go ahead and rotate the case here because the other connectors are going to be on the bottom. So now we're going to work on the front panel connector, and that's going to be located on the bottom right of your motherboard. And it has a total of 9 pins with 1 missing, so make sure you match the missing pin. All right, now that's nice connected. I can start tucking this cable inside. Before I tackle the HD audio, if you're going to reuse the FP12 on the bottom, then this PWM connector can be connected to any 4-pin PWM connectors on your motherboard. Most motherboards will have several of these spread across the bottom of the motherboard, sometimes on the side and on the top as well. So if I wanted to connect it, this has like a little tab here, so make sure you match up the tabs. There's a total of 4 pins, but you can utilize the 3. And so I would connect this more towards left on this motherboard, and that can get connected right over there, for example. I'm just gonna leave that there momentarily. And then the final connector is gonna be your HD audio, which is normally gonna be located on the bottom left of your motherboard. And same thing here, you have a total of 9 pins with a missing pin, so make sure you match that missing pin. All right, I wanna give you guys a quick close-up of all the connectors. We have the HD on the bottom left. We have the PWM connector for the bottom fan connected to this PWM, but again, it could be connected to either one of these 4-pin PWM connectors. The option is yours. We have the front panel connector, the USB-A connector, and finally the USB-C connector. If you're also going to use the rear fan here, which the rear fan is going to be connected here, you're more than welcome to untangle that cable and route it to any one of these PWM headers if you're planning on using both of these fans. But since we're using the FP12s, I'm just gonna unplug this and we're gonna put that to the side. And now that we have all of our Y40 case connected to the motherboard, we're now ready to start installing the thick FP12 fans. All right, so we're gonna start off with the top fans. Now I'm just going ahead and connect all these first. The Y40 can support 3 120mm fans, or you can attach a 360mm AIO right on top as well. What I like about the FP12s is that when you get these FP12s, they actually will send you compatible radiator screws because these fans are so thick, and so you need screws that are long enough to accommodate any other AIO. So if you want to use these fans with a different style of AIO, you definitely can. Just keep in mind that you're going to need a Nexus portal in order to connect these fans, unless if you just want to use PWM, that's another option as well. So the thick FP12s are very easy to magnetically chain. We have 2 sides. We have a female and we have a male end. Whenever you want to magnetically connect them, you just match the male to the female end. They basically magnetically attach, making it very easy and convenient to daisy chain. Now, in order to install fans, this bracket is not removable. So when attaching 3 120mm fans, we want to make sure we're exhausting air out. And so we want to have the fans positioned this way. So when we're putting it up like this, you want to make sure that the direction of airflow is coming outside, whether you're going to be using an AIO or standard fans. Now, inside the packaging of your thick fans, they give you a total of 12 case fan screws. And so I recommend holding at least 2 screws to make this very simple. And before we attach our FP12s, make sure you have a female end on the left side of the case, and you have the male end on the right side of the case, because this is what's going to be connected to our Q60 on the side. I would probably leave the screws on top. I'll start off with 4. Having a screwdriver with a strong magnetic tip is very useful. So we're going to position our fans right underneath. I would probably have it more towards the center. And I'm going to start off with this one over here. It'll probably be a little bit easier if you have a friend or a significant other. And I'm just going to attach this one right here real quick, just so I can have all these fans kind of connected, so I can slowly let them go. And so now we can take our time to screw all the remaining screws. All right, so now all 12 screws are in, and then the next fan we're going to attack is going to be the rear fan. All right, now we're ready to install our rear fan. It's going to go right on top of here. Now for the rear, we want to make sure that we position the fan this way because it's going to be exhausting hot air out of the case. And the next thing here is we have to connect the Nexus link to the female end on the left side of the top fans, which I told you guys to leave on the left side. The Q60 AIO, where we're going to connect all these fans to this USB-C, the bottom of the Q60 fans also has a Nexus link here. For now, we're just going to establish one connector. So this connector here, you're gonna find inside the box. It is a male to female magnetic connector type M. And since we have the connector on the top left, we wanna first connect the male end on that top left. So I'm gonna bring you guys a little bit closer here. I'm gonna position the magnetic connector like this. That connector is gonna be literally right here. And the great thing about this being magnetic is that as long as you get it close enough, it should automatically fall into place like it just did right there. So that fell into place. And now we can connect the top male end right over here. And then we can go ahead and tuck these cables up. And as we position the fans upward, it should automatically hide those cables. Now go ahead and grab some case fan screws. I'm gonna have one in standby. And go ahead and find that perfect position. So I think for now I'm going to position this fan in the same position that the older fan was, that one that I just replaced. I'm going to use one screw first. All right, so I'm going to turn this case around. So once you're back here, go ahead and screw in the remaining 3 case fan screws. All right, so now I have all 4 screws in, and now we have our rear fan and our top fan successfully installed. And now the next fan that we're going to tackle is going to be our bottom fan. So let's go ahead and rotate that real quick. Now that we're back behind the case, we're now ready to install our bottom fan. And for the bottom fan, we want to make sure that we set it to intake. So this is the back of the fan, not this way, but this way, so that way it's intaking cold air and blowing that on top of the case. Now I will say that because these fans are very thick, it's going to be a very tight fit trying to push that all the way in onto these mounting screw holes. However, they will fit if you really push it in, which I'll definitely show you. Now another thing to consider here is that since I'm going to have the Q60 installed like this way, we have a female connector right over here. I'm going to take advantage of that female connector on the Q60 and make sure that the male end is sticking outwards. That way it becomes easy to connect that connector. Now for those of you that are going to be using the LN60, these also utilize the Nexus Link USB-C system. So there are multiple options on how we can reconnect this into this ecosystem. Make this simple and easy. Since we're going to reserve the male end to connect to the Q60 and the top end connecting to the Q60 as well to the Type C on the top, I can utilize the female end of this fan and attach a male connector to a Type C so that when we're putting the fan inside, this USB-C is now female. And then when we install our LN60 noodle, the longest side has a male end where we can easily connect it and have everything chained up. Now that we know all of that, let's go ahead and start pushing this fan in. And so remember, it could be a very tight fit, but it will definitely go through. And now let's go ahead and flip the case underneath, making sure of course that all your screws are intact, because otherwise everything will fall over. Now, previously we did remove this filter already, but you're more than welcome to take it off again because I'll put it back in. And so now you'll see the screw holes here. So all I have to do is push this a little bit more downward. And now we have all of our screw holes lined up. And now we're going to take our case fan screws and you're going to screw all 4 in. All right, I got all 4 screws in. And now I'm going to reattach the filter here. And we can go ahead and lift up our case again. And there's our bottom fan installed with the Nexus Link with a female Type C to connect our Noodle LN60, which we'll connect that later on. But for now, we're going to tuck these cables in. And now we still have that male end, which will definitely connect to the Q60 fan. And so before side mounting this thick Q60, for those of you guys that are going to be using the Noodle LN60, this will be the perfect time to put it in first before we install the thick Q60. So inside the Noodle LN60 box, you're going to get a total of 5 clips. You're going to get 2 straight adapters that we're going to use on the floor of the case. Now these are specifically for the Y60 or Y70, so these 2 we're not going to use. And finally, we're going to have a 90-degree clip, which we are going to use on the Y40. So a total of 3 clips. And when it comes to installing the LN60, you want to install the straight adapter on the right directly on the first line, just like this. And we would attach the right angle towards the end of the first floor. And then 1 straight adapter you can put right over here. So go ahead and peel this off to reveal the adhesive side. And I'm going to place that right over here. All right, now that we have all 3 clips in, you're gonna grab your LN60, and now these come in both white and black, but I think the white is gonna give it a nice color contrast with the black. And the shorter cable is going to start from the left, and then the longer piece is going to be over here. Go ahead and put that right into the clip. And then while we're positioning this one, we can go ahead and route this cable right towards this ending over here. Go ahead and pull it through so we have a lot of space. And now we can position this on the right on a 90-degree clip. Now our LN60 installed on the floor of the case. And now if you ever want to straighten this out, you could also pull from this side as much as you can to make this as straight as possible. Yep, that looks like it worked out. Definitely have a straighter line. And to connect that connector that I was just showing you earlier. And so for those of you guys that are using the Noodle, you should see 2 cables here. We have a shorter USB-C here, and then we have the longer USB-C on this side. And that connector that we just connected on our bottom fan has a female Type-C. So now we can actually join these together. Just like that. And now our Noodle LN60 is now connected to this whole ecosystem, connecting to the bottom fan, the rear fan, and the top 3 fans, and then eventually to the Q60. So that's an awesome touch. If you're not going to be using a Q series, you would make the connection to the Nexus Portal, which is a separate hub, but the Q series does make it very easy. So for now, I'm just going to leave these cables underneath. And so now go ahead and rotate your case. And now we're finally ready to install our Q60. All right, so here's a thick Q60 AIO. Now this is considered a 240mm AIO since these do come pre-installed with the FP12 fans, which makes it very convenient and easy. They also have it already pre-installed with these fans already set to intake, which is perfect for side mounting this on our Y40. And it comes with this awesome 5-inch ultra slim IPS display that gives you many different angles that you can rotate the display, and also comes with some really nice RGB effect. And of course we have a beautiful white and black color scheme. Now the way this Q60 works is right in the box you're going to have your accessory pack, and that's going to include this dual USB-C connector, and this USB-C connector connects right over here, and so there's only really one way to connect it. So once that's connected, it's going to split off to these 3 connectors. This is going to be powered by a 6-pin PCIe connector, a 4-pin PWM, and an internal USB header. And furthermore, this USB-C that you see right over here is what's going to start the Nexus link chain, so we can link up all of the fans that we have connected, including our Noodle LN60. And because these are the FP12 fans, of course, right on the bottom, as you can see here, we have another Nexus link, a female end, which I'm going to use this end to connect our bottom fan. We're definitely going to be using this bottom connector so we can complete that full chain. Now I gotta say, I appreciate Hyte for going above and beyond with how they label their additional accessories, because they make it very easy to locate everything you need. As you can see here, it's going to include the Intel kit and also the AMD kit. Since we're using the AMD kit, we're going to be using this one. We can go ahead and put that to the side, but if you're going to be using Intel, then definitely follow the Intel. We're going to be following the AMD. And inside the accessory pack, we're going to have our radiator screws, and we're also going to have the 4 spring nuts, which you're going to use for AMD or Intel. Now that we have that full breakdown, let's go ahead and connect this massive radiator on our Y40. All right, so before positioning the Q60, I want to go over some potential thick problems, and that's all going to depend on which motherboard you're actually going to end up using. Now, because the Y40 is such a compact case, and the fact that this motherboard's USB connectors are shooting from the right side, that means that these cables are sticking out more than usual. And you can kind of see these cables are blocking some of the screw hole points to accommodate 140mm fans, for example. So if you have a different motherboard, you may have it where the connectors are located on top, which should avoid a bunch of these cables sticking out so much. Now, no worries, it'll still fit in here. So the screw holes for the 120mm is going to be more on the right side of the case, so that's great. Another thing as well is that because we have the thick FP12 fans on top, we don't have enough space to screw in all of the radiator screws. We're only going to have space to screw in just 2 screws. It should be more than enough to lock down the Q60, especially since we're not going to be rising it as high up. It's actually going to sit more towards the floor of the case. With all that out of the way, make sure you have your dual USB-C connected already. And before I start to position the Q60 inside, I want to pass these cables now right over here. And then while we're here, I think it'll be a good opportunity to also connect the female magnetic connector to a male USB-C. We can have this also connected. So I'm just gonna connect this real quick. And remember when I said that the top fans, we want the male end connector to be on this side. So the male connector is right over here. And of course, this will be able to magnetically stick right on top. So just like that. So that went in perfectly. And now we're ready to start installing our Q60. Hold the AIO tubes. And keep in mind that we do have the noodle. And so as I'm positioning it inside, kind of like in an upward angle, as much as I can, so that way we don't touch the LN60. And then you can keep going. And then right about here, I'm just gonna let it go real quick for a second because I want to pass these cables more out of the way. And then the Nexus link, I want to also position this a little bit higher so we can hide the cables, of course. And then we can slowly start pushing this in. All right, and I'm going to rotate the case real quick so I can give you a better look at how we're looking so far. And just a FYI, I did move the clip to more towards the end. That way the noodle stays as straight as possible. And so since we're still here, go ahead and grab this cable and kind of keep it upwards and start pushing it. So the noodle is going to block the pathway for the Q60 to go more in. So just lift up the Q60 a little bit and then push it through. And then from here, I'm going to rotate the case again to give you a better look. And just like I was referring to earlier, especially this USB-A does stick out a lot. So it kind of makes it hard for me to squeeze it in. And you'll notice that this LN60 cable is also still in the way. So I can just push this more down, kind of lift up the Q60 over the USB cable. And then I should be able to then push it where you'll see these two screw holes. And unfortunately, this opening here is not long enough to screw in the other screw. And even if I try to lift it up, we do have some type of thread, but it's not enough to really screw it in. And so I'm just gonna let the Q60 just fall in its place. So the weight of the Q60 is gonna be on the floor. And so screwing these two screws should be more than enough to hold the Q60 in place. And so go ahead and grab the radiator screws. And this case, we're just going to use 2. And then I'm going to apply some pressure here, making sure it's kind of straight. And then I'm going to screw in the right one first. And I can actually just let it go and screw in the left one. All right, so now we have those 2 screws attached, and it's not going to go anywhere because, like I said earlier, the weight of this Q60 is on the floor when I rotate the case. And so you'll notice that the Q60 over here, it is going to push the end of the noodle a little bit more downwards. I could have probably moved the clip a little bit more towards the right maybe, but for now I'm just going to leave it the way it is because I would rather have the Q60 secured with the weight being held more by the floor of the case. And so this is how the front is going to look with the Q60 installed. And now we're ready to install the pump directly on the CPU. And so for this step, I'm going to lay the case down. So very carefully put the screen and the pump close to the motherboard, and we're going to gently lie the case down and we're gonna install that. All right, now we're ready to install the pump on top of the CPU. And since we're using the Ryzen 7 9800 XTD, you want to locate the AMD kits, which is going to include the bracket that's going to be attached to the actual pump. Right now it has an Intel, so we have to remove that. And it's also going to include standoffs as well. And then make sure you have the spring nuts here as well, which is going to be responsible for screwing the whole pump in. And so the first step is to remove these 2 plastic pieces here. You can use a Phillips screwdriver to remove all 4 screws. All right, so with those 4 screws out of the way, we can now remove these 2 black pieces. Make sure you save this just in case. Go ahead and grab the AM4, AM5 mounting standoffs, and you're going to screw that in using this bottom right on these screw holes. All right, now that we have all 4 standoffs on, now we have to replace this Intel bracket. And so to remove it, we just pull this, same thing for this top piece. And next we're going to grab our AMD brackets, There's two different sides. I would use the letter on top because that's how it was on the Intel one. And then we just slide it back in. Take the other side. Slide it right in. All right, and that went nice and smoothly. And then removing this cover, it's going to reveal our cold plate. And as you can see here, we have pre-installed thermal paste in a really nice circular pattern, so we don't have to worry about installing any type of thermal paste. But if you wanted to use your own thermal paste, then you can wipe this off and apply thermal paste on the CPU instead. All right, so when we're ready to position it over the standoffs, just make sure you have the looping portion of the screen on top. And so to make this easier, let me just move the screen all the way to the left here so you can see exactly what's going on. And we can go ahead and start placing the pump over the standoffs. Can leave it there for now, and we're going to grab our spring nuts, and with the spring nuts quickly screw in the bottom right slightly. Now I have all the 4 screws in slightly, and now we're ready to tighten each one of these screws. If you ever have difficulties accessing one of the screws, you can go ahead and flip the screen all the way over. All right, and just like that, we have it successfully installed. And I love the fact that we can position the screen virtually anywhere with so many different angles, which I think is pretty cool. So for now, I'm just going to leave this right in the center. And so the next step is connecting the AIO pump header. And as we remembered, we connected that dual USB-C on the side, so that connector is behind. So for now, let's go ahead and lift up the case. All right, so right behind the case with that dual USB-C connection that we just connected, we should have 3 cables hanging around. Starting with this cable over here, this is our pump header, which controls, of course, the pump. And this one I want to route right on top. So we're just gonna let that hang for a little bit and we'll connect that right after. And then this one over here is gonna be our internal USB header. And that's gonna be located on the bottom of your motherboard. So we're going to pass that underneath. Get it, pull this. And then this one over here is a 6-pin PCIe connector, which is gonna be connected to the PSU. So we don't have that yet. But for now, I'm gonna put this cable behind, tuck all these cables in, and we'll definitely cable manage that as much as we can. And now let's go ahead and flip the case over. So the first cable that I want to attach is going to be our AIO pump header. Now, since this Edge TI Wi-Fi does have a pump header, it's located on the middle, which is the only one that's color coded in white. And so I'm going to connect that right there. And it could be a little bit tricky here since we don't have that much space thanks to this thick FP12 fans, but should have enough space to just connect this in. And I'm just going to tuck these cables out. Right, so that's perfect. And the next cable here is going to be our internal USB header, and those are going to be on the bottom of your motherboard. Take a look at your layout. Most motherboards will have 2 internal USBs, so on this one they're right down in the middle, and I can use either or. We have a total of 9 pins with 1 missing, so make sure you match that as well. Make sure you push it all the way through, and I can start tucking this cable underneath. And now the Q60 has the internal USB connected and the AIO pump header connected, with the final thing to be the power, but we'll tackle that later. And actually, I almost forgot about this bottom Nexus link. So since we got 2 sets of FP12s, you should have enough cables for these connectors. And so you're going to grab a male connector that has a female Type-C. And the great thing here is that I can position this cable like this, and from the corner should have a strong enough magnetic to automatically just connect by itself. And then we can route this cable just underneath where all the other cables are going through. So we're going to pull that in, and so we're going to rotate the case, which we could then connect that to that male end connector right over here. All right, and that will establish the link to the bottom fan, and we'll cable manage all of these when it's time to cable manage. I almost forgot that step there. All right, so the next step here is to finally install our power supply unit. And this is the First Player NGDP 1000 watt platinum rated power supply unit for amazing efficiency. Now they do have this in a gold rated efficiency, which is more cost effective, but I personally, if the budget allows, like to go for a platinum rated or higher PSU for the best efficiency. And so let's go ahead and rotate this case to install that PSU. Now that we're behind the case, we're gonna have a lot of cables in the way. So go ahead and start taking these cables out of the way. And so before positioning your PSU, pay attention to where the fan is at. You want to make sure you position the fan to the bottom so that it is intaking a cold air into the PSU. And of course, you want to make sure that the AC plug is also located on this side over here, with the modular connectors facing this way. So you're going to notice some rubber padding here, and it's going to go literally right there. So go ahead and push as much cables as possible. and try to slide it in. Might have to maneuver the cables a little bit. All right, and I'm gonna get a little bit closer here. Right, and so these two cables in the way of the path, so try to slowly move these cables upwards. You're gonna notice this little spacing here. And once we have that up, we should be able to now push the PSU all the way to the right, just like that. Now that we're behind, you're gonna notice some holes over here. These are the mounting screws for the PSU, and once we push the PSU, you'll see the screw holes. Go ahead and grab 4 PSU screws. You can grab this in the height accessory box or in the box of your PSU, and then we're gonna screw all 4 in. All right, now that we have all 4 screws in, our PSU is nicely installed, and I'm just gonna rotate it here so you can see exactly how it looks like. As you can see, we have the first player NGDP, and for now, we're going to push all these cables in, because now comes the fun part, which are all the PSU cables. I'm going to go ahead and explain all these cables so you know exactly which one to use. Starting off with the motherboard connector here. This is a 24-pin connector, very easy to identify because it is the largest connector. Next up are going to be your CPU 8-pin connectors, and we get a total of 2 CPU connectors, and they can be identified with the letterings CPU. On our motherboard, we're actually going to be using both of these cables. Next up is going to be our 12-volt high power connector. Now these connectors are specifically for the NVIDIA 40 series or 50 series GPUs that calls for this connector. Since I'm using the 5080, I'll be using this cable. Next up is going to be our PCIe connectors, and we get a total of 4. Now for graphics card that does not call for the 12-volt high power connector, you can definitely utilize PCIe instead for other graphics cards. Now some graphics card might call for just 1, some of them call for 2, some 3, or maybe even Power Hungry might use all 4. Now because our Q60 actually uses PCIe, these are 8 pins, but you'll notice right over here I can actually slide this out to convert it to a 6-pin. So we're definitely going to be using at least 1 PCIe connector for our Q60 radiator. Next up are going to be your SATA power connectors, and this PSU gives you 3 sets of SATA power connectors, and these are to connect hard drives, extra power to hubs, and things like that. Now on our specific build, we're actually not going to be using any SATA power connectors, so we can completely disregard these. And finally, we have your Molex connectors here. Now these are really old style peripheral connectors for older devices. I personally have never used it, so on this build we're not going to be using this at all. So once again, the cables we're going to use is going to be the motherboard cable, 2 CPU connectors, 1 12-volt high power cable, and 1 PCIe connector. Make sure you save these cables in case you ever need to use them in the future, since these are specific for your PSU. All right, now we're ready to install our PSU cables directly to the motherboard and route them behind to then finally connect it to the PSU. Now, in my scenario here, I'm going to be using these custom sleeve cables with a awesome white and black color scheme that will match this whole Panda theme. The first cables that we're going to use are going to be the CPU power connector, and that's going to be connected on the top left, which thanks to these fans do make it a little bit difficult to connect. And keep in mind that since I'm going to be using the CPU cabled sleeve, I'm going to be connecting this one first. For those that are not going to be using the sleeve connection, then you would connect this where it says CPU directly to the CPU power connectors. And so if you're going to be using the Easy DIY, they come separated kind of like this. So make sure you join them together. They kind of interlock. They have like a interlocking mechanism here, so make sure you connect them because we're going to be using 2 8-pin connectors. So on the top of the case, we do have this opening over here, and these are our CPU connectors. And the easiest way that I found to connect it is to just route the cables from the bottom. So you'll see this connector right over here. See, I'll have like enough room to connect it, and make sure the tab is facing up, and you would just connect it. I'll position the 8-pin right in, and then you should be able to push it in all the way through. Just like that. And then go ahead, run the wire right on the corner. So you'll see this right over here, and then I can then tuck it inside this pathway. I have to just pull some more cable, pass it right underneath, and then I'm able to pull it all the way through. And I'm going to route these cables more towards the right side to make room for our left connectors. All right, here's the second one. Make sure we interlock these. And same thing here, I'm gonna go straight from the bottom and connect the second one. Push it all the way through. All right, and same thing here, we're going to pass the bottom connector right in the corner. Pull that all the way through. You may need to go underneath and push the cables a little bit. All right, and with the excess cable, let's go ahead and tuck this right into this opening here. And then same thing, we're gonna pull it through. All right, and that's pretty much it. We have two CPU connected already without the need to remove this whole thing. Now, honestly, because of the thickness of the fans, we're not really gonna see these black and white cables, but I figured since it comes in a pack, I might as well just use it. And just to give you guys a close-up, this is how it would look like. All right, next is our 24-pin motherboard connector, and that's gonna be connected right over here. And once again, I'm gonna be using the sleeved version. Otherwise, you can go ahead and take your PSU power connector and connect that directly. And so you're gonna locate this tab up here, and that's gonna be positioned on the right side. So go ahead and connect that right in, push that in all the way through. All right, so now that that's connected, I also forgot to mention that I did take the time to attach the comb accessories. They give you a whole bunch of different combs, and that just allows these cables not to wiggle so much. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna bend, and we're gonna feed this extension in the opening where all the other cables are at as well. All right, so both the motherboard and the CPU connectors are in. So now let's go ahead and rotate the case. All right, so now that we're back here, we're gonna see the extension cables, or your original PSU cables will be hanging out as well. So the first thing we're gonna tackle is gonna be the CPU connector, because I wanna go ahead and cable manage and route it on the corner of the case. If you're using extenders, you wanna make sure you connect the CPU end of that extender, just like you would when you connect it to the actual motherboard. So we have two. Now these two are now connected, and there's a lot of length here. And so before we proceed, in the corner of the case and throughout the case, we have a couple of openings here to attach zip ties or Velcro straps, which is what I personally like to use. They're spread across all around the case so we can easily route these cables. And so since we have the CPU connected, I want to first manage that first by using these white Velcro straps. And I'll link these down below as well. I personally like to use Velcro straps, but if you want to use zip ties instead, you're more than welcome to. Height does give you zip ties in the box a little bit, and the First Player PSU also gives you black zip ties. So I'm going to start applying the Velcro straps on the corner of the case. All right, so I just attached 3 Velcro straps on the side, and I also added an additional 2 Velcro straps on over here as well, so we can route this whole CPU cable. And so now I'm going to push this to the corner and strap them in. All right, so now our CPU cable is routed to the side of the case, right on top of the PSU, and that gives me enough space to connect the CPU connectors on the PSU. Before connecting our CPU connectors, I'm going to connect my motherboard connector and also route that as well. Same thing here, we have a lot of placements for zip ties and Velcro straps, so I'm going to go ahead and attach some more Velcro straps so we can start routing everything together. All right, so I did some extra cable managing here. I added 2 Velcro straps right on top of here to contain the motherboard extension and the additional cables that were hanging over here. I added another one over here, and then all of these cables that were bunched up, I just put them in the corner with a really large Velcro strap here as well, just so that I can have enough clearance over here, and also it's easier for me to visualize where all the cables go. If you're going to be using a 12-volt high power cable, connect this first to the PSU, because that connector is located all the way on the top left corner of the PSU. And so I'm going to rotate the case here so you can get a better look. Actually, I was able to put my phone's flashlight here so I can see better. Once you find the connector, go ahead and push it all the way in. All right, so now our 12-volt high power cable is connected. And next thing I'm going to connect is going to be the PCIe connector to connect our Q60, which is right over here. And this takes 6 pins. So remember, we have to remove one of the pins. And on the other side, this is going to be the one that's going to be connected to the PSU. And you want to make sure you locate where it says PCIe, and most of the times these are shared with your CPU connectors. So I'm going to put this more towards the middle. All right, so now our PCIe connector is connected to the PSU, and then the next connector that we're going to connect to the power supply unit is going to be our CPU connectors, which is right over here. Now I'm going to position that more on the top left, so it's easier for me to connect. Okay, first one's connected, grab the second one. All right, second one's connected. All right, so I just Velcro strap that right over here. And next we're going to connect our motherboard connectors. But as you can see, since I'm using that cabled extender, I have so much length. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bend this and I'm gonna strap it alongside the CPU cables. So they're like this. And now we should have enough length to finally connect the ends of the motherboard connectors. And on this PSU that's gonna be located right over here, there's one large connector and there's a smaller connector. I'm gonna go ahead and connect those in. Perfect. I had just enough length to connect that one, and then the final one. All right. Now our motherboard CPU is connected, and let's not forget about the PCIe connector that we still have to connect to our Q60. Once again, if the 8 pins are attached, go ahead and remove 2 of the pins to reveal 6. Now we're able to connect the 6-pin PCIe connector to our Q60, and I'm going to go ahead and cable manage this. And so right on the bottom here, I added another Velcro strap over here. There's a lot of loops on this case, and I'm just going to quickly tuck that right in. All right, so that's being held very nicely. And the final thing here is going to be our 12-volt high power cable, which we are going to be using a seed sleeve cable, but for now I'm just going to push this upwards. And so I'm only going to leave a little bit, and the rest I'm going to tuck in for now to kind of figure out exactly how much room is needed, because of course we're going to be using this as well. And now we're ready to finally attach our graphics card. Go ahead and rotate the case. All right, so we're at the home stretch and we're almost ready to install our graphics card. This is the MSI RTX 5080 Gaming Trio, which is a beautiful white graphics card that's going to be vertically mounted on this Y40 case. Now, before we install the graphics card, we do have to reinstall our riser cable that we removed earlier. What we're going to do first is we're going to connect this directly to the main PCIe slot on our motherboard, which is this slot over here. So make sure you pay attention to this notch. It's gonna match up with this notch right over here. It might be a little bit difficult because the Q60 tubes are very thick, and so just go ahead and maneuver it a little bit. Kind of work your way behind tubes, and then you should be able to align the riser to the PCIe slot and then go ahead and push it in. All right, so that went in nice and smooth. Now that we have that connected, let's go ahead and rotate the case. That the screw holes are almost perfectly aligned. So go ahead and start taking the screws. Might be able to move this just a little bit and screw it in. All right, so both screws are in, securing the top portion of the riser. And now we're able to secure the bottom 2 screws from the bottom left and the top right of the riser cable. So go ahead and position it over the screw holes. So I'm going to start with the bottom left. Might have to go in from an angle here because the Q60 is in the way. All right, perfectly. We have that back in. Go ahead and remove this tape, revealing the slots. And the final thing here is to remove the PCIe slot covers on this side of the case. And that's all going to depend on which graphics card you use. The MSI Gaming Trio is on the slimmer end, so it only uses 2 slots. And so the great thing about the Y40 is that it supports up to 4 slot covers, which is incredible for the size of this case. So we're just going to take off 2 slots for the 5080 Gaming Trio. And you're going to save these screws because we're going to use the same ones, and these slot covers should come off very easily. All right, and finally, we're going to position our graphics card right on top, making sure we line this notch with that notch right over there. And you want to be very gentle here. Should have enough space for everything. All right, just found the connection here. You may have to move the tubes a little bit more to the back, but once you have that halfway, go ahead and push it down to fully connect it in place. And next you're gonna grab the 2 screws, and they're basically these 2 screws. All right, and finally, the last thing here is to connect our 12-volt high power cable. I'm gonna go ahead and move the screen all the way to the left to give us the most space. Now, if you're just gonna use the original PSU cable, you can just go ahead and connect it. But since we're gonna be using this white and black sleeve, I'm going to use this instead. And when it comes to the 12 volt high power cable, make sure this is connected all the way in. All right, so that's connected all the way in. And since this is sleeved and it has cable combs already there, I'm just going to position this here. And now I'm going to connect the 12 volt high power, connect it all the way through. And now we're going to tuck the cable all the way in. So I'm going to go from the back because the majority of the cable is in the back, and I'm going to pull it from the back. Be nice and gentle, of course. All right, so we got that all connected on the back, and I'm going to flip this screen here real quick just so I can see how much space we have. All right, so that cable was successfully installed. And even though some of them are a little bit hidden, I still think that adds a really beautiful touch. So let's go ahead and turn the case around. And here is our 12 volt high power cable. And here we're going to reopen this Velcro strap, and I'm just going to Velcro everything on that floor, and we should be done with all the cables. All right, so now that 12 volt high power cable is fully connected. All right, and a couple of things to cover before we close everything off. I did remove the sleeve that was covering these AIO tubes. They blocked a lot of the cables, and they honestly look way better without this sleeve. And I'm pretty sure I was supposed to remove this anyways, so I'll make sure to let you guys know to take this out before you start attaching your GPU. Another note here, that depending on the size and weight of your graphics card, you may have a subtle sag. Because the MSI Gaming Trio is not so much of a heavy card, very subtle sag is not that bad at all. You can see if I lift this up just a little bit, you can see that that will be perfectly leveled. And so you have the option of adding something in the corner, on the bottom corner if you wanted to. And so for example, I have these cable management silicone rubber pieces that come with like a whole bunch of different accessories. So what I use here is just use this kind of like this little piece here on top, and I position it on the corner of the GPU and wedge that right into the corner, push that right in. And so now you'll notice that the graphics card has a much better level. Now this will look a lot better if I had it in black, but I only have white at the moment. Again, you may not run into this, but for really large graphics card, you may see some sag. So those are some things that you could do to counter that. Final cable management. I did the best that I could, being that we don't have that much space. I did have the motherboard cables strapped up here, but I decided to remove it because the cables were sticking out too much, so that when I attached the back cover, it had like a little bit of a gap. Nothing too serious though, so I'd rather just move the bulk of that cable on the bottom. Since we do have space, make sure you leave, of course, enough breathing room for your bottom fan, and there's no type of obstructions at all. So everything is nicely connected. So now we're ready to assemble the case, and first we're going to start with the back cover, since we're already back here, and we're just going to position that right back in, clip it in. All right, and that closed beautifully. Gonna show the back side. All right, here's the backside over here. I think that white motherboard over there gives it that nice contrast. We have the PSU. I think if you were to go for a white PSU, I think this will also stand out too. And as for the front, let's go ahead and attach the top panel. Put that right on top. Snap it into place. And we're gonna take our side glass panel. I'm gonna place that right in. So go ahead and peel off the plastics. Looks like there's some plastic on the bottom of the glass. Definitely remove that before putting this on. And let's go ahead and take off this yellow caution sticker. And we're probably gonna need some glass cleaner to take off that residue of that triangle. And then for the side, all right, and as you can see, our case is now fully assembled. Almost forgot about the Q60 screen. Let's go ahead and peel that right out. All right, everything's connected. I have this now moved to my corner desk here. Now ready to power it on. The power button is right in the center. So 3, 2. As you can see, everything is turning on. Get you guys a little bit closer here. And for a better look, I'm gonna remove the side glass since it's a little tinted and the glass reflects. The first thing you're gonna notice is that the Noodle LN60 does not turn on, and this is because we've had to first set up the Height Nexus software. Now I already have Windows installed, so really the only thing that needs to be installed is gonna be the Nexus software to control the screen, the Noodle LN60, and all of the fan curves. Now I'm gonna set up Nexus and give you guys a full rundown on how to control everything. All right, and I finally have everything set up. This time I want to power it on again to show you guys exactly what it would look like once you have everything set up. And also dim the lights just a bit. So let's go ahead and power this on again. And as we can see, now we have the Noodle LN60 that will turn on as long as you have the Nexus software installed. You also see the Q60 over here with its pre-animation, and as long as you have the Nexus software configured, you can also configure the lights as well, which I think looks really nice. And I also have the lighting on the GPU as well on the RTX 5080, but this thing looks incredible. All right, so everything just loaded up. I think the Noodle LN60s definitely helps make the interior stand out with this soft RGB glow. And it definitely helps having RGB lighting on your GPU as well. The MSI Gaming Trio has that signature claw mark with the RGB, and there's also some RGB on the side as well, which I think looks awesome. And we also have RGB on the Height Q60 logo, and I absolutely love the RGB lighting off of the Q60 screen, because if I turn this to the side and more towards the right here, you can see on the back it shoots out some RGB lighting that gives it a beautiful subtle RGB. And because we don't have any RGB on the fans, I think having that nice RGB glow from the back really makes it stand out and pop. Now before I go over the Nexus software that we can use to control pump and fan curves, I want to quickly touch upon the airflow off of this Y40 case. Now because we have a total of 7 fans, excluding the ones on the GPU and the PSU, we have 7 fans installed, 4 exhaust and 3 in the intake. It's important to know that because we have less intake fans versus exhaust fans, if all of these fans are spinning at the same RPM, then this case is going to have negative air pressure. And generally, when it comes to PC cases, you generally want to have a positive air pressure, so more air coming into the case versus coming out of the case. And in order to have positive airflow on this Y40, you can easily customize the fan curves of each of these fans. So if I go ahead on and look at the Nexus software over here, this is the beta version by the way, right here on the cooling is where we can control all of the curves of the AIO pump and all of the fans. And right over here on their Height Q60, I can click on FP12, and these are all of the fans that are currently connected directly to the Q60. And so currently A1, A2, and A3 are the fans on top. B1 is the one on the rear. C1 and C2 are the fans attached to the radiator. And finally, D1 is going to be the bottom fan. And so all of the exhaust fans, I set the curves at idle to be 25%. So they're spinning at about 650 RPM. And all of the intake fans I have at 40%, which they are spinning at about 1150 RPM. And by doing it this way, the amount of airflow that's going inside of the case is now greater than the volume air that's going out of the case, creating positive air pressure, which is more optimal, ensuring that all of your components stay nice and cool, and you're minimizing the amount of dust buildups. Now, while we're on the topic of Nexus, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys exactly what to do here. All right, so if you wanted to control the RGB of the Noodle and the fan curves of the FP12 fans, then you want to use the Height Nexus software. So right over here on the lighting is where you can adjust the RGB lighting, and right on the right side, we have 3 that are currently connected. We have, of course, the Noodle LN60, and I can quickly disable that if I wanted to. You can see that shut off. We have the Thick Q60 backlight, so that's the screen. So I can go ahead and turn that off and turn it back on. And then you have the Thick Q60 logo, and by turning it off, that shut off. And currently I have it under static, which I can easily change the color to whatever color I want. And as you can see, those 3 RGB elements automatically change. And I can really customize whatever color I want. There's a lot of custom settings that you could do here. There's different effects, animations that you can literally customize to your liking, and you can also adjust the brightness as well. So I'm gonna leave it as static, and if you want it to be a little bit darker, you can adjust the brightness, which is awesome. And then any other RGB elements that are not controlled off of the Nexus software, you can utilize a separate program. So since I have an MSI motherboard, I can utilize the MSI sensor using Mystic Light. Thankfully, my graphics card is also from MSI, so I can literally customize the RGB elements of my RAM, of the GPU, and the Dragon logo over there individually. And that, again, it depends on whether your motherboard has RGB, and that's all going to completely depend on the brand you use. Each brand has its own separate software, or you can utilize a third-party app if you wanted to. That's completely up to you. Next thing I want to cover is faces, and right over here on the faces is where you can control the screen off of this 5-inch display. Of course, there's a lot of customizations that you can do, such as uploading your custom GIFs and putting different things on that screen, which is awesome. And when it comes to wallpaper, over here is where you can customize the wallpaper, of course. So I'm going to go back to clock real quick, and we have a couple of presets here. So if I click on this, that'll set its own preset there, or you can add your own custom GIFs here. So for example, if I click on this, that will automatically replace itself. And the final thing to touch upon, since we talked about the airflow of this case, is going to be the cooling option. So under cooling is where you can control all of your curves, and on the left side of the cooling is your inputs. And so on the left side, we can see the 9800 X3D. There's a drop down, and I can select any one of these inputs to create a custom curve depending on whatever input I decide to connect it to. Now, I personally just like to create the fan curves depending on the core temperature of the CPU. Again, you can customize the curves however you see fit. To make things easy for you guys, I'm just gonna quickly go down here. Clicking the first option here allows you to do a custom one. You can see right here is graph number 6. And then I can right click to name it whatever I want. I'm just gonna name this test. And so with this graph, you can see over here it says no sensor input connected. And so I can choose any one of these inputs here, the temperature of the CPU. For example, this is the core temperature. All I have to do is click on this all the way to this right here, and you'll see that that little line now connects to this graph or this curve. And then to finish the connection, we have outputs on the right side. And currently these are my two outputs that I have. I can actually control the GPU fans if I wanted to, or I can individually control a specific fan. So these are all the thick FP12 fans, or I can use this for the pump. And so just for an example, B1 is the one on the rear, and all I have to do is click on this and drag it to this graph, and now the B1 is connected to the curve on here. And you'll notice right over here that the percentage changed to 47%, and it reads out the RPM. And when I click on the graph, I can customize whatever curve I want. The way I personally set everything up in my setup here is by having a custom curve for the pump, having another curve for the bottom fan, for the side fans, top fans, and the rear fan. That way I can customize the curves depending on which fans they are. So that's everything you need to know on how to control your Q60 pump and fan curves. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial build. I had a great time building in this Y40 case. Now I want to give a huge shout out to Hyte for sending this awesome panda colored Y40 along with their FP12 fans and their thick Q60 radiator. And let's not forget about that Noodle LN60 as well. And I also want to give a huge special shout out as well to MSI for their awesome X870E HTI Wi-Fi motherboard, and also First Player for their awesome 1000 watt platinum rated PSU. And finally, I want to thank you who's viewing this video right now for spending your quality time watching my videos. I really appreciate the support you guys give me on my videos, and I have so much more to come. I'm now going to roll some fire B-roll. Thank you guys so much for watching, and enjoy.